Good afternoon, and welcome to TKAAM Thursdays, your midday cultural break. I'm Dr. Lana Reeves, the Education and Community Outreach Director here at the Kansas African American Museum. And as this is Mental Health Awareness Month, today's topic is maintaining good mental health. And we have today as our special guest, Dr. Michelle Vann. Welcome, Dr. Vann.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here today.
Well, would you introduce yourself to our audience and help them to understand why you're wonderfully qualified to discuss this topic
Wonderfully
today?
qualified. Let's see. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. My name is Michelle Vann. I was or am an educator within the Wichita, America. For 20 years, I was in the public school system and decided that it was time for me to realize that there was more in the world besides being in a classroom. And I chose to come out, went to higher ed, and at this point I got my doctorate in Christian counseling. And so I decided to take that along with some coaching and go out and help some women get their lives together.
Okay. All right. That sounds, and I understand that you really have some awesome impact in those lives as well.
Well, that's what people say.
Yeah. And they wouldn't say it if you weren't doing it, okay?
This is true.
So I know these days we're kind of still dealing with the pandemic. And, in the African American community, there's so many other things that we deal with. And then, of course, it's May. So there's finals and graduation, Mother's Day, Memorial Day, and then there's everyday ordinary things to deal with as well. And then, of course, there's special cases that we in the African American community deal with as well. So what are some of the things that we can do in spite of all that to maintain good mental health?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have to decide and really base our lives on what it is that who we are. So first of all, we're mind, body, and spirit. So when those things are out of balance, when my mind, body, and spirit are not in balance, then there is a piece in which my mental health, my physical health, or my spiritual health will be impacted by that. And so one of the things that we start to find out with the pandemic is that people were isolated. As human beings, we tend to need to have community. We tend to need to be close to somebody else, to have conversation with someone else, to have that validation from someone. And by being isolated, we missed all of that. We missed community. We missed being able to have those times of going to coffee with our friends or going to church because churches were closed. Right. And a lot of times that is where people began to get their connectivity, where they got all of those things, those kudos that they needed in order to have their mental stability. And we like to think that much like our physical body needs work to make sure that it's maintained, so does our mind and so does our spirit. So there's a level in my spirit. I've got to read. I've got to practice, whatever that prayer meditation looks like for me. I've got to be in community with those people that have like faith. And it's the same thing with my mind. And a lot of times, because especially in Black communities, we're taught whatever happens in our house stays in our house. Well, what happens when we hold that stuff in is we start to find out that we're angry. We start to find out that we're blowing up at people that don't have anything to do with what's going on. And so because of COVID, because of the pandemic, because of the isolation, we started to see that happen a lot. And people that were able to kind of hold it together because they would get little pieces of blessings or little pieces of you're doing great or those kinds of things, they didn't have those. And we start seeing people fall apart.
Okay. So what were some of the things that you were helping them to do to get it back together again?
So there's lots of tools that you can use to get it back together. Some of those can be going to counseling. I am not a therapist. And so I make that very clear. I am not a therapist, but I do use therapeutic sorts of practices. And so some of that may be looking at your thinking, feeling cycle. Some of that might be journaling. Some of that might be just coming in and having some conversation, because sometimes, and more often than not, the answers are inside of us already. We just need to be able to talk about it long enough and thorough enough and without judgment enough that we can come to that conclusion. And so that's a lot of it. So journaling, meditation, getting some physical activity. Right now it's starting to get warm. And so being able to go outside, being able to get the sun on your face, being able to go into places that truly are helpful. I mean, while we don't necessarily love to, maybe go to the mall and walk, but that beats nothing.
Right.
You can't just sit in the house.
Walking around your own block, maybe.
Walking around your block, even if you don't feel comfortable walking your block, walking in your backyard.
Right.
It's just getting outside. It's getting out. One of the things especially during the pandemic, I used to really encourage when, if you can't do anything else but open up those blinds, open up your blinds, let the sun come in, open up, the windows, make sure that go sit on your porch. Physically distance. I mean, again, right now we're getting to the place where we can kind of be back in a place where we can talk to each other and we can kind of have some of those conversations close up versus, as for a while we were physically distanced. But, having those times of just coming together. Community is important.
Mm-hmm. And then some of us lost people. So that
Absolutely.
brought on some depression as well because of COVID-19. And then would you say that maybe some people who were able to cope better were because they were keeping those lines of communication open with their phones or Facebook or whatever, that, writing letters or, like you said, journaling?
Mm-hmm. I think I was able and I've kind of been doing this, unofficial, official, kind of conversations with people of, what did help you? And I think while we didn't necessarily, and we're like zoomed out, I think for a lot of people, Zoom and being able to do those video conferencing brought some families together in ways that they hadn't been before. Because, and I was speaking to a lady the other day, and I think she's like 84. And she said, I finally figured out how to use this Zoom thing. And she said, the one thing that I have realized is now I have been able to talk to my grandkids more, and I get to actually see what's happening in their lives, and I can get to, they get to know me and I get to know them in a way that I never did before, because prior to that, I would just know about what was happening to them when my kids would call me. Now my grandkids can get on, or we can FaceTime, and we can actually see each other and have these interactions. So I think there were some things, like while we think, oh gosh, the pandemic was horrible. Yeah, there were some things that weren't so great about it, but there were so many good things that came out of it. We got to slow down. We got to actually do this thing called rest that most of us don't do.
Right.
What? Sleeping actually does help our mentality. When I'm not sleeping, we see all those Snickers commercials, and they always talk about, you're hangry or, whatever. But the thing about it is, a lot of times why people are snapping is because they're tired.
Exactly.
So we've been able to learn how to rest. We've been able to learn how to really slow down. And I don't want us to get back into this panic mode of feeling like we're missing out, or feeling like we have to go back and fill our schedules completely full, because we don't.
No.
We realize that our kids don't have to be in 700 sports. What? They can actually go outside and ride their bike. You can actually have family time. So some of those things, I think, that happened during the pandemic were good for us. They were good for our mental health. They were good for our families. They were good for us to be able to just get back to some of those things that were valuable to us growing up.
Right. And that we were probably missing because we were rushing here and there.
Oh, absolutely.
Doing that thing that we were not able to do during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
So it brought our families closer together. And technology did help. You're right. I know that the more people that I know who have learned how to use Zoom, or even when churches closed down, they didn't close completely. You just couldn't go to church.
Right.
You had to church a different way.
Right.
There were people churching over the phone, over the computer, and via internet. So one way or another.
Well, I would say that I met over the pandemic, because of technology and because meetings had to change. I met some of the most incredible women in virtual spaces that are not from Wichita, that are from all over the United States, that I would have never had the opportunity to meet.
Right.
If it had not been for the idea that technology had changed the way we were doing things. And so I think, when we think about mental health, I want to caution people to not really think about change in a bad way. Because a lot of times when things change, when we are going through change, people get, oh my gosh, I don't like. No, we may not like it, but I ask people to open their minds to it. Because when we open our mind to change, when we open our mind to the fact that what I was doing, it might have worked, but it might not have been the best thing for me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I'm doing this thing because I've gotten into a habit of doing it, but it may not be the best thing for me or for my spirituality or for my mental health or for my physicality. You know, I would love to eat the whole sleeve of cookies, but it's probably not the best thing for me.
Exactly. And I know that even here at TKAAM, the pandemic caused us to have to use our abilities in a different kind of way as well. I mean, this show grew out of the pandemic.
Right.
The way we did our Trailblazers Hall of Fame induction
And it was really
ceremonies
nice.
was totally different. And it helped us to look at things from a new and different perspective. And that, you're right, definitely did make some things better. But now, what about these everyday ordinary things that we deal with, whether there's pandemic or not? You know, losing people, birthdays, gray hair. You know, there's all these things that can affect us one way or another, or just the fact of what is it sometimes these days, just living while Black.
Yeah.
How do we help maintain good mental health in that situation?
Well, I think it's different for everybody. I think if we're honest, what works for me and it may not work for you. What works for you may not work for the next person. And so I think we have to get to know ourselves. That's number one. We have to be reintroduced to who we are, because we have taken on titles and we have allowed them to become who we are. I operate as a mother, but that's not who I am.
Exactly.
That is a title in which I hold, and it is a space in which I feel for those people in which I've given birth to. But I am more than that. I am more than just the job that I hold or the title that I fulfill. And so I think part of it is really getting back. I'll go back to the pandemic again, in the sense that I got really frustrated in the pandemic because there were, people that were on social media, and they were like, if you don't come out of the pandemic with a book or a product or this or that. And I was like, hold up. Maybe what I need to do during this pandemic is get to know me.
Exactly.
I need to spend some time not worrying about what everybody else is doing and what everybody else is saying, and just get to know who I am. Because when I understand me, and when I understand what I like and what I don't like, what is good for me and what's not good for me, then I show up in the world a much more put together person, a much wholer person. And so because I'm whole, then I'm able to give to you in a way that is more endearing and is more genuine. And that's really what we're all looking for. We're looking for genuine people to just speak into our lives. And so I would say that, as we're looking at how do we deal with loss? So I had a relative that died during COVID, and I had some friends, parents who died during COVID. And, death is one of those things that's hard to deal with, but everybody mourns and grieves in a different way. I can't tell you how you have to grieve, but I can be there for you to help usher you through that. And I think that's the biggest piece, is that we've got to figure out who's in our circle. Who are those women? Who are those people that are in our circle that are there to build us, to help us to move forward? One of my friends is a very strong person, but every now and then I will just text her or I will call her and I'll just say, how's your spirit? Now, I got that. Another one of my friends has said, don't ask people how they're doing, because people will lie to you. They'll tell you that they're fine. Ask them how's their spirit. It throws them off and it makes them have to think.
That does.
And so every now and then this particular strong person, I will text her or, how's your spirit today? And it throws her off every time because she's used to always being the person to ask everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we just need to think outside of the box and think outside of, because we're very self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, America has made us very self-centered. And so it's thinking outside of the box, it's thinking outside of what we want,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I be a blessing? Every day when I wake up in the morning, before I get going, I ask God, show me who I can bless today. Who is it that I'm supposed to speak into their lives? Who is it that I'm supposed to, give a word of encouragement? And because of that, someone always comes. And because of that, I can always be blessed too. Because as I bless, as I give out,
Mm-hmm.
I get back. It's a lot of reciprocity. The more I give out, the more I get back.
Right. And then you too also return to that whole African way of doing things. Because like you said, in America, it's more like me, me, me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas traditionally, the African way of doing things is more like we.
Mm-hmm.
And when you wake up thinking, who can I bless, or
Mm-hmm.
show me who I can bless today, that definitely turns that completely around into a whole new way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And it makes your day, it always gives you this day of where I'm constantly looking,
Mm-hmm.
who is it that I'm supposed to bless? Who is it that I'm supposed to talk? What seed am I supposed to sow into today? Is that financial seed? Is it words? Is it, time? What am I supposed to do for someone else? And I think sometimes when we get out of, and I won't say this completely, but, sometimes we're depressed. And there's levels in depression. So there's, the clinical piece where you do need to have, medication
Mm-hmm.
and psychotherapy and things of that nature. But then there's just these mild levels of depression that happen sometimes because it's, we've had days and days and days of rain and no sun. And, so there's just these
seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah. There's just these lighter things that when I get out of me,
Mm-hmm.
and I began to help others, that my spirit begins to lift.
Right.
And so there's some things that we just really have to begin to look outside of ourselves. We have to get past being selfish.
So now I know waking up with that question in the morning helps you to do that. What are some other ways that helps get outside of yourself?
So I really, again, it's those collaborations with some of those women that God has brought into my life. Again, spirituality is one of those things that, who you choose to serve. And, because we live in a world that is so diverse,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's spiritual practices are very different. Personally, I believe that, there are some things when we read the word of God, and here's the thing, find a Bible translation that makes sense to you, because King James, thus and thous, just,
We don't talk that way.
nobody talks that way. Even people in England don't talk that way. So there's a sense in which that doesn't necessarily make sense to us. And so find a translation that works, whether it's the Passion Translation or the Message Translation, or, and so there are times when I will go on and, go into my app and I'm looking at the word, the verse for that day, and it is exactly what I need in my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's exact, or, people that I'm connected with will post something and it'll be exactly, like, girl, you need to get it together. Quit tripping. Don't be anxious for all the stuff that, and so there's just those pieces in which when we are open
Mm-hmm.
to, and I'll say it this way, and then and I don't want, all of my Bible thumpers out there to be like, what? But when we're open to the universe,
Mm-hmm.
when we're open to what God has for us, when we're open to what is to come for our life, then we find that we're less despondent, that we're less, just caught up in these forms of depression, in these forms of, and don't get me wrong, as a coach and as a person who understands how, the thinking, feeling cycle works, there are some times when I think about some things that they cause me to have a feeling, that feeling causes me to think something else. So I have to be very intentional about what I allow, the seeds I allow to be planted in my life, in my mind and in my heart. And so I have to watch who I talk to. There are some people that you're gonna have to
Yeah.
cut off.
Yes.
You know,
stay
that
away.
there's some people that right now, you know, when you say, what are some things that you need to do? You need to look at your circle. Who's in it?
Mhm.
Some of those people you need to say, I like you as a person, but you're not good for me. And so if that's the case, then those are people that I need to, you know, put them off. And I need to bring in those people and really seek who are the people that really need to be close to me. One of my coaches always says at the end of every year, she goes through her whole list of friends that she considers, people that she considers in her circle, and she evaluates where they are. And do you need to be here? What seat on the bus do you need to hold?
The back, the front, or the middle, huh?
Or off?
At the bus stop, huh?
Right, because there's some people that need to get off the bus because you're not doing anything to bring this whole situation to the place it needs to go to.
Now, what if you're doing some self-reflection and you realize that you're the person that needs to be off the bus? What can we do to put ourselves in a better frame of mind or in a better place to be the one who is on the bus, who is back on the bus, to get back on that bus?
So I think that's where coaching comes in. I think that's where, you know, therapy comes in. I think that's where, you know, finding those books that speak to you. I love Brene Brown. I love Lisa Nichols. There are some people, you know, Bishop Jakes does some great work. Joyce Myers does great work. So I think there are some people that have already created and have spoken to their experience that can be very beneficial to you.
Right.
So I think, you know, reading helps. I think if you can find podcasts that, you know, there are some that are great for mental health. There are some people that are out there. I'm actually working with another therapist, and with a therapist, and we're going to be doing some things moving forward. But there's just some pieces in which, you know, we have to seek outside of ourselves. There's tons of resources. And the thing about it right now is, you know, with the old interweb, there's nothing that you can't find. There's YouTube videos about everything. You can do anything.
And some of those books you're talking about are even available as audio books on YouTube. So,
and I love it because what I tend to do is I tend to, you know, find a 30-minute piece of those. And that's what I'll do when I walk. So I'll go walk, I'll turn on a 30-minute, you know, piece on Audible, whether it's Brene Brown or whether it's, you know, whoever else, Liz Nichols or whoever I choose to do that day. And that's what I listen to for that 30 minutes while I walk.
Sounds like a good plan. All righty. So now we talked about how to be more open, but I'm sure that there is sometimes when you need to be self-reflective.
Absolutely.
To find out, like you said, where is your spirit today? So what kinds of things, I think one of the things that you'll probably mention is journaling. How exactly would you recommend a person that says, okay, maybe journaling is a way I can get to know myself better? How would you recommend they go about that?
So there's a lot of ways to journal. And I mean, again, that's one of those things that you have to go and figure out what works for you. There's tons and tons of templates that are out there. So whether it's just, you know, free journaling where I'm just writing the words that are coming to me, or whether I'm writing, you know, maybe I'm doing pictures, maybe I'm doing, you know, there's a myriad of ways in which journaling can help. For some people, they just write out everything that they're feeling. For some people, they are writing almost stories. Some people just like to write words, you know, just random words that pop into their head. So I think, you know, the journaling is one of those pieces that you have to kind of look at. How does it work for me and how I learned? Because again, this is all about learning about myself.
Yes. What is it? Way back in the ancient days, it was Imhotep who said, know yourself and the secret of the universe is yours. So if you just know who you are, you get a better idea of where you're coming from and even where you want to go.
And I think the problem is that social media has, well, some social media, and then I would say some, because we have, as Black people, we have been taught that we had to be smarter, we had to be stronger, we had to be wiser, we had to, you know, we had to be more in order to even be seen, let alone be elevated. And because of that, we have taken on ideologies that maybe didn't belong to us. We have tried to mask who we were in order to be able to fit into a society that does not appreciate who we are as Black women specifically.
Mhm.
Black men, definitely not. And so there is a piece in which we have really began to have to mask who we are. And so for some of us, I went on a journey probably about 7 years ago. And I wrote a book called Stop the Merry-Go-Round, I Want to Get Off. And it was mainly because there is this piece in which our lives are kind of like a merry-go-round. There, there's music, and it's soothing, and it gives us this sense of calm, even though we're not calm. And there's this piece in which we're going around in circles and around in circles and around in circles. And while we're going around, we feel like we're making progress. And there's exactly these pieces in which I'm going up and down. So I feel like I'm moving, and I feel like there's movement. But when I really look at it, I get right back to the same place that I was. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm looking at my life and I continue to see the same patterns over and over and over again, there's a piece in which I have to stop and say, I've got to stop this. Mm-hmm. And I've got to reevaluate where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. And because of that, I went on this journey for several years of really just trying to discover who I was. Because in my other life as a pastor's wife, I had to, where I felt like I won't say I had to, but I felt like I had to become all things to all people. And when you become all things to all people, you lose who you are. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very difficult journey to try to come back from that.
So now, how would a person know that they need to start thinking about finding out for sure who they are when, as you put it, their other life mm-hmm. becomes another life of who they truly are? How do we?
I think when you become dissatisfied, mm-hmm. I think that's the when you start looking, and there is this dissatisfaction, mm-hmm. when this piece that I think all of us know when we're off. Yes. We don't always know we're not always sure exactly how to identify it, but we know that we're off, and we know that where we are is not where we want to be. And so and I asked a therapist this the other day, I said, well, in your opinion, when do you think people should seek therapy? Well, her answer was anytime that your activities of daily living are interrupted, and you're not able to flow in a normal pattern, then that's when you should look. But I also think that you have to look at what is normal, because mm-hmm. sometimes we've made our dysfunction normal.
Okay.
And so there is a piece in which we have to really begin to look at who has God called me to be. And that's where, for me, my spirituality comes in, because for me, I had to lay before God and say, who am I? Who did you create me to be? I know what I have done. I know the things that I have taken on. I know all of these things that I have piled on myself. Mm-hmm. But who did you call me to be from the foundation of the earth? And then another piece that I challenge women to do is to go back and find that little girl. That little girl who was in that little girl you used to be, that little girl who, would go outside and twirl in the rain, and the little girl who was excited about everything, who was, open to the universe, who was open to, oh my gosh, everything was beautiful. That little girl, mm-hmm. go back and find her. And when you go back and find her, love her and forgive her for anything that you feel like didn't happen. So knowing that there are some things that have happened in our lives, traumatic things, whether we were molested, whether we were abandoned, whether, there's just all myriads of things that happen in Black families. Well, that happen in all families, but in Black families, a lot of times, we get a spanking, and then we, shut up, or I'm gonna give you something to cry for. Come on, man, you just did. Come on now.
That's why I'm crying.
But there's these traumas that we have, and that are reoccurring, that we don't always know how to deal with. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we've suppressed all of these things, and we put a bow on it, and we put it on the shelf, and we said, I'm not going to deal with this, or we felt like it was dealt with, but it's still on the shelf. But the thing about anytime that you put the jack in the box, when the right set of circumstances comes, you're going to twist and twist and twist, and at some point it's going to pop out. And we don't know what it's going to pop out, and we can't always control how and when it pops out. And so those are the things that, as we start to look at, how do I evaluate who I am and what I want to do, and how do I get my mental health under wraps, and how do I get this under control? It's really going back to that little girl. What was the stuff that, got her off track? What made me be cynical? What made me, not be that little girl, not be open to the world, not be open to change, not be open to, what are the things that made me jaded?
So now I understand that it comes time for us to wrap up, that there's a special program that you're getting ready to start. As a matter of fact, you're starting the day this program premieres, that people can get involved in. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're doing a program called Live Free, and Live Free is just that. It is about getting free from some of those bondages that have kept our mind, body, and spirit tied up. And so we will do a 4-week session. We'll use some Brene Brown. We'll use some Lisa Nichols. We'll use a friend of mine. Her name is Shun Strickland. And so we're using some of those ideologies from those programs. We're using some real good techniques, if you will, and tools. And you'll walk away with great tools, a great resource book in order to be able to help you not only get free, but stay free. And so that's what it's going to be. So we'll do 4 weeks of Live Free, and it'll be a great time.
All righty. So now how can people get connected to, if they want to be involved in the Live Free program?
So Live Free, you can go to my website. It is Vanntastic, Vanntastic, VanntasticSolutions.com. And if you go under my coaching section, it's at the very bottom of the page. And or if you go on to Vanntastic Solutions on Facebook, it is on there as well.
Okay. So now, since it does start the day this airs, will they still be able to sign up that day? Okay. Then we will definitely include that information, and hope that some of you who know that this living free is something you want to do, that you will take this opportunity to make that possible. And again, I want to thank you, Dr. Vann, for coming and sitting down with us today. And I want to thank you all for joining in and listening here at TKAAM Thursdays, your midday cultural break. And we'll see you again in the next episode.